emphasis on big dog Nate, the Duke of Westside Harvey. He's going to be talking about the coaching the box squat today. He's going to do some example stuff, so hopefully we can move around, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, try not to fall asleep. I know you just ate. Thank you. Thanks for having me down. Thanks for all your work putting this together. I know that's not easy. So a little bit about me real quick. I just started with Elite FTS, Executive Equipment Specialist. Basically help people out with equipment needs, training needs, whatever you need. Get a hold of me. We'll help you out. Little background information. When I was 14 years old, I'd been training for 2 years at the time, and my dad mentioned to me, you know, there's people that can coach it, like strength coaches is like a job, like you can go do that and get paid for it. So it was basically like from that point on, I knew I wanted to coach. So, and I wasn't really sure what the job entailed, as none of us are at an early age, or even when we're in college, we really aren't sure what we're in for, I don't think. No, I don't want that update right now. So basically, I was 14 years old, I've been training for 2 years, and I knew I wanted to coach. So all through high school, I was training, went through college, pursuing this goal. Luckily, I took a little bit of hiatus out of school, came back, did my graduate work at University of Buffalo, and right out of grad school, I landed a D1 job. I did do the internship, all the kind of steps that we've all taken or need to be taken. But the main point is I did reach that goal. And I would say, honestly, there's probably like 5 big factors that were a part of me obtaining that goal. Like my parents, you know, like my wife putting up with all my bullshit. You know, coaches, we know how this goes. But there's a lot of hours that go into everything, so we know that's tough. And honestly, one of those top 5 was probably the information and the people that I met through Elite FTS. So to be here speaking to you guys and representing them is, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. This will be a practical presentation. This is one of my favorite quotes from Jim Wendler. You want science and studies? Fuck you, I've got blood and scars and vomit. This sat above my desk for years. It's still above my desk. Does anybody know who that is? Besides you? Besides you? Okay, the guy behind me, guy that helps me out, kind of my powerlifting coach. One of my mentors, one of the people I've been lucky enough to learn under, Paul Childress. Does anybody remember WPO powerlifting besides you two? Okay, so Paul held the world record for a 308 class for, I want to say 7 years or so. Is now 45 years old, still competes. Like he did a meet a couple years ago, had a bad day, totaled 2,600. So this is where my background comes from, and these are the caliber of people that I've been lucky enough to learn from. Adam's boss now, Ryan Groman, down at Presbyterian College. Very similar, very technical guys. Put a lot of emphasis on how the lifts are done. And that's going to be part of my talk today. I think, and I don't want to sound like the old fuddy-duddy, the old like Hammer talked about the old guys in the room, the old strength coaches. I don't want to be that guy, but I feel like there's a trend in our industry where people are latching on to kind of the accessory stuff. Let's look at it this way. For me, life always goes back to training. So if you guys follow conjugate method at all, we have like max effort work, dynamic effort work. So like to me, those are like your meat and potatoes, right? And then you have your accessory work, which is like your pull downs, sit-ups, abs, a little bit of isolation hip work. I feel like there's a shift in our industry when it should be more on the dynamic effort and max effort work. We're going to these outside things and we're putting too much emphasis on them. Like the big thing right now is movement, right? Everybody talks about movement, and when they talk about that stuff, they're talking about how my athletes move in warm-up and how they sprint and how they, but everybody talks about movement, but then we see videos of what's going on in the weight room, and the movement of the squat and the bench and the deadlift is not emphasized, okay? So My point is, we kind of need to shift it back to those things, because that's where you can make the most difference for your kids. And I can say this because I've witnessed it. When you squat correctly and do deadlifts correctly and bench correctly, everybody talks about proper neuromuscular firing patterns. If you do those big three correct, a lot of that stuff takes care of itself, okay? Not that those accessory things aren't important, because you do need those. Like, you can't go in and just bench and squat and deadlift and be a good athlete. You have to take care of those outside things that I talked about. But where's your priority? Where's your emphasis, okay? Part of my point being, who do you want to, which one of these guys are you going to pick to be an O-lineman? Right? This is an actual picture from the combine, guy on the left, okay? Now, these are extreme pictures to make an example, but my point is, you're not going to get this when the majority of your program is your athletes kneeling on the floor and doing a 10-pound landmine press, and, okay, do you get my point? Like, we have to keep the strength in our programs, okay? The job title is Strength Conditioning, okay? With all these little frilly outside accessory movements, we're not gonna get this. We're not gonna get, I could have put a ton of pictures up here, right? Like the shredded linebacker, LeBron James, kind of an outlier, right? He's gonna look like that anyways. But if you have a less than average athlete who doesn't look like LeBron James, you're not gonna push him towards being physically like LeBron James with all the foo-foo kind of outside exercises, okay? You've gotta have a good foundation, and you've gotta prioritize that. Okay, so circle that all around. We had a lot of success in our program. Like I said, movement in the weight room was a big priority. We coached really hard, especially on our main lifts. One of the movements was box squats, and I think it's made a really big difference for us. Dr. Mann, you talked about the three things that cause ACL, right? Internal rotation, forward drift in the knees. What else? Abduction, okay? So when we box squat correctly, we take care of all those three things with one movement. I didn't have to do 10 warm-up drills. Not that we didn't warm up, but I'm addressing those three needs within my main movement, and I'm moving my athletes closer to the guy that was down here on the right, okay? In my last job, I was lucky enough to have one ACL in 8 years, okay? And it was a volleyball girl celebrating after she had a really good block in a game. She jumped up and came down and blew her knee up. But my point is, I think 1 in 8 years was pretty good. And I think a big reason for that is we emphasize doing things right, doing our movements right, okay? Not just our warm-ups, but this stuff, the strength stuff, the stuff that can make the most difference. Why would I box squat an athlete? It's a power lifter's movement, right? No. You don't go to a meet and do a box squat. It's just an exercise, okay? We got to kind of get away from being afraid of certain exercises in the weight room, okay? They're just tools, okay? So even if you leave here and decide not to box squat, a lot of these cues can carry over to free squat, okay? So if you're going to free squat, make sure your kids are free squatting right, all right? Why did we do it? Easier to recover from. A big part of that, our athletes have to go to practice and competition and class and boyfriends, girlfriends, have to deal with all this other outside stuff. So I can box squat, still make them very strong and explosive. Our testing results, for the most part, continue to go up, even after we had athletes in the program for a long time. Why do athletes take steroids? Recover. Why do we box squat? Recover. So I can still get strong and I can recover faster. Wide stance will better prepare your athletes for the rigor of their sport. There aren't very many sports played here. Not that we don't need to be strong here, but if you did a time analysis, Hammer talked about this the other night, time analysis and movement analysis of your athletes, how long they're in different positions or hitting different energy systems. If you did that with where most athletes' feet are during their competition. It's going to be here, it's going to be here. Look how wide my feet are. Okay, so getting strong out there only makes sense to me. If you do it right, you can train lateral force production on your main strength movement. Okay, we did very little agility work. Part of that is scheduling, part of that is the athletes constantly being in practice with their coaches and stuff, okay? Just based on those things, we didn't have time to put it in there, okay? But with box squat, when you do it right, and you'll see during the demonstration later on, if you box squat correctly, you're pushing out. So you're practicing lateral force production, okay? So like an O-lineman, pass block, push out to the side, playing defense, right? A basketball player, it all carries over. Our testing results, we did test agility, and the trend was up, okay? Everybody seemed to do well. We can build mobility and strength in the hips with one exercise. How many strength coaches do you hear talk about, oh, they're tight in the hips, they can't open their hips up? If you box squat correctly, you're taking care of that without stretching, right? The best way to build mobility is through strength, okay? How many of you guys get sick of yelling at your kids to squat lower? Right? Like you want to punch yourself in the face. If you set your box up correctly, which we'll go through, you have a lot less of that. You'll get a little bit of it because sometimes they get tired and they sit forward out of their hips, so it will cause them to be a little higher, but at least I have a standard there, so at least maybe I'll get 90% of my reps to depth, where I'm going to get more glute stretch and recruitment than if I'm just yelling at them all the time. Or if I'm on this end of the room way down here, then these guys are squatting high. You know how it goes, okay? So it helps regulate things. You know you're getting to proper depth more. Smaller learning curve. When we had kids come in new to the system, we would typically run 2 to 3 weeks of just speed work, so light weights, but coach them to move it fast. And then they were ready to go. Like usually week 3, we'd work them up to something heavy, and we're hitting heavy weights with proper form. So we're very small learning curve. It's very easy to pick up. You know, when I was in grad school, I would do personal training on the side and stuff, and I could take 60-year-old ladies and have them box squatting within a day. So if they can learn it, like the athletes can pick it up. But then, to that point, you'll get the argument, well, they're athletes, we need to stimulate them in the weight room. My thought on that was, make that simple, so when they go out to their sport or competition, they have more gas in the tank to do more athletic things, okay? Because we can get the same results with a simpler task in the weight room. Less wear and tear on your knees. It's a lot easier to sit back in your hips and squat properly and keep a perpendicular shin angle with a box behind you, okay? Especially with the weaknesses we see in our athletes. We always complain about lack of posterior chain strength, right? So when it gets heavy, they're going to shift forward where they're comfortable into their quads and knees. With a box, we get them back in their hips and their knees stay back, and we load the hips and train the glutes like everybody talks about all the time, right? We're training the glutes, okay? And we take wear and tear off their knees. The biggest thing on this is, like, we would get kids come over from free squatting and box squat for a couple weeks, and the feedback was, my knees have never felt this good. Like, I had a basketball kid who was so bad during the summer, he had to walk down the stairs sideways because his knees were so banged up. In the summer, like, that's when you should be kind of recuperating and stuff. But it was the weight room and the summer play was banging him up so bad. But a few weeks of box squatting, and that's usually how the feedback went. Most effective way to, sports are all first step, right? Like, in my mind, we do need to train the plyometric aspect, right? But a lot of muscle contractions while you're actually playing sport are kind of relaxed or static, and then boom, right? So if I'm a basketball player, I'm kind of down to my stance. Someone tries to go past me or make a move, I gotta go. So it's almost relaxed to dynamic. Okay, does that make sense? It's like that first step, that pop. If you box squat right, you kind of train that. And then I think it's a superior method for athletes. That's just me. It's my opinion. When to box squat? When did we box squat? 99% of the time we box squatted for the above reasons. I'm trying to think. The only time we would free squat on our max effort days was once in a while with some of our more advanced groups, just for variation. So like our throwers were very good lifters, so maybe once every 3 months or something we might throw a free squat in just for an exercise variation. But all the rest of the time we're on the box. On dynamic days, always with a wide stance. Okay? Wide stance to me for an athlete is, it's a little bit out of their comfort zone, because if you do this, you'll see the kids are hesitant to get outside of shoulder width, right? Which is fine because that's where they're weak. So that's why we want to go out there and train. But the two factors that I kind of went by was, it made them a little uncomfortable to come out to the width that we had them at. And the second factor was their foot needs to be wide enough, so when I go to push out and press off the box, I have a kind of an angled vector, or so I can put horizontal force into the floor. Okay, so if my feet are in here and I try to push out, I'm just going to get kind of this effect. So it's got to be out wide enough so when I'm here, I push out, right, and I get that horizontal force vector. Okay, and so that's going to vary with different height kids. And then, once we were efficient at box squatting, I would suggest on your heavy days, vary your stance. So you could switch it every other week. Like you could go wide, narrow every other week. Or you could do like 2 weeks wide, 1 week narrow. Okay, throw a little bit of narrow stuff in there to help keep the quads firing correctly, help stay strong inside your shoulder width. Okay. We would also do a single leg variation at least once a week. Okay, so that's another way you can do that. But keep that in there. We did get to the point we were wide all the time for a period of time, and we started seeing a little bit of hip issues. I think it kind of beat the kids up in here through the groin area and stuff. Okay, so just something to be careful of. Okay, setting up your box correctly. This is one of the things I see screwed up a lot. Can you guys see that line? There's a red line there. It should be bigger. It's hard to see. So basically, first day, teach your kids how to set up their box. We had these boxes, which are good. That would be my first pick, okay? Because what I did, does anybody box squat their kids in here? Okay, one of the biggest pains, correct me if I'm wrong, is when you get different groups coming in and you got to sit there and watch your athletes adjust the box. Yeah, so it drives you nuts because my basketball player comes in, puts a box all the way up. They got these things here, you can adjust. But then my 5'2" track girl comes in and she's too lazy to move the pins, so she squats off of the 6'8" kid's box. It doesn't work. So if you're going to use these, what you do, and CJ's done it, take the pins out, drop the box all the way down, put the pins back in, and duct tape them so they can't move the pins. And then we were lucky enough to have somebody redid a floor, so we had a bunch of the floor mats cut out to the size of the box. So then all our starting box was the same height, and then every kid knew, okay, I'm a 5 mat squatter, I'm 3 mat, 2 mat, and I just kind of put that on them. You got to know your box height. How many mats do you need? Okay. There's also there's a 2-inch difference on these. You just turn it on a different face and it adjusts the box height. So those work well too. Setting your box height. Get your athlete in front of the box. Okay, have the point between your legs. It gives them a little sense of security. So if a kid's not used to sitting back, they're going to be scared that the box isn't going to be there. So if that point's there, they can set up and kind of, right, and know that it's there. It gives them a little security. When you're setting your box height, make sure you get their feet out where they should be, like they're about to squat, and then have them sit back on the box. Make sure their shins are perpendicular, because if their shins are perpendicular, their hips will be back on the box where they should be. Okay, does that make sense? And then you adjust their box height. So, right here, if I draw a line from the top of my kneecap to the crease of my hip, that line should be parallel with the floor. Now you can see this diagram. If I go by that rule, that's actually a little high. But here's the thing, your kids aren't in a powerlifting competition. okay? So this is okay. The majority of the thigh is parallel with the floor, okay? And it's gonna be different, like I have a little more quad and then I have a little more ass, so it kind of skews that a little bit. Like my actual femur is parallel with the floor, right? Like that might get called in a competition, but you're working with athletes, that's fine, okay? What you don't want to see is the hip way up here, right? And you don't need to go too low. To me, there's no point in going below parallel to train athletes. Once in a while, we would do a low box variation just for something different, but to do it all the time, I don't think is going to give you any advantage. So have them sit on that box, put their feet out where they should be when they squat, make sure their shin's perpendicular, look at them from the side, thighs parallel. Okay, you're a 3-mat squatter. That's your box height when you come in. Then you're set for the rest of the year, okay? Any questions so far? If you guys got a question, raise your hand. Yep. Food coma. Food coma. Okay. All right, you want to come up? Lauren's going to demonstrate for us. Just for the main reason that I don't want to split my pants open sitting on a box. So this will be our bar. So go ahead, start behind it. Like just put it in your hands like. So have your kids, because you will see this, have your kids start with the bar in front of them. Because what you will see, your kids will come in and pick up the bar and put it on their back. Okay? So go ahead, hold it there like you're sitting in a squat rack. Make sure your hands are even on the bar. Let your kids put their hands where they're comfortable. Okay, when I squat on a straight bar, I like to go out here. A lot of them are going to like to go in here because they don't have very big upper backs or the strength, okay? So go ahead, dip under the bar. And if their hands are even on the bar, they're going to come right underneath in the center, okay? So they're all set up. And then go ahead, stand up. Now, that was good. See what she did? She stood up with the bar and she went step, step, and she was there. That's it. That's all the steps you need. Don't walk back up a country mile, okay? So, chins up, fill your stomach up, 2 steps back, feet wide. Okay, so now she's narrow. Yep, a little more. You feel a little bit uncomfortable? Perfect. Okay. Toes, this is gonna vary on the kids' hip mobility. I like to teach out a little bit, not crazy, right, duck foot. If they can go straight ahead and that's where they're comfortable, let them, okay? Head's in the bar, elbows are forward. Now, before you squat, you're gonna take a big breath in, right? I'm just kind of going through these and then we'll go through and let her squat some and I'll correct her as she goes, but this is just kind of general overview. When we taught kids, I would do this. I would do this and walk them through it and have them all watch me first. And then the next thing we would do is we would break them off so they'd go to their racks. And then they would all do the bar for 20 to warm up. And then we would work up, like just put a little bit of weight on and start doing speed sets. And I'd go around the room and help them pick their weights, okay? And we just start working it that way. And so like day 1, we might squat for a half hour. It'd just be them hitting sets of 2 and us walking around and correcting them and helping them set their speed weight. Okay, now she's got her feet out. Next thing, settle the weight. Okay, I talked about having your feet wide and having that horizontal pressure. Let that weight push you, kind of push you down and disperse that weight out horizontally. Okay, you should have pressure going out the sides of your foot, like it feels like your foot's going to split out your shoe. Split out the side of your shoe. Hips back first, knees out hard. Go ahead, reach your butt, reach your butt, reach your butt. So that wasn't too bad, but I'm looking at her from the side and her knees forward a little bit. Okay, not a big deal. Go ahead and stand up. So she paused on the box. Good, because that's a problem you're going to see. The kids don't want to sit there. Pressure on the feet going up. Okay. Yeah, you don't got to squat. Hang out for a second. Pause in the box. She did it right. Okay. That's going to be a problem. When you first start, I guarantee. Okay. Okay, on the way up, top priority. You don't have to squat. Just hang out. Thank you. Yeah, just hang out for a second. We're almost there. Top priority. Coming off the box. So if you did all the things right on the way down, on the descent, those things will typically take care of themselves on the way up. So like we talked about the ACL prevention, internal rotation of the knees. If I open my knees the right way on the way down, they're probably going to stay there on the way up. If my knees are out and pressure's out on my feet on the way down, it'll do the right thing on the way up. So our priority on the way up is drive your shoulders into the bar as hard as you can. Try to break the bar in half. We would tell the kids kill the bar, okay? And if they get this, this will help them accelerate the bar. Like we're trying to get athletes to move fast and have some pop. When they kind of got this, that's when those things clicked. And to me, that's when they'll start to understand being explosive, okay? And that's when we saw their squats kind of really take off, and they started to be good squatters when this thing clicked, okay? And that's where your carryover is. Everybody talks about dynamic correspondence. That was our dynamic correspondence. When we started to see that, we started to see some good things. Talked about that. Okay, so I talked about everything looking good on the way down. If it doesn't look good on the way down, you got to take care of that first. Fix the descent first before you start worrying about these things. Okay, fix one thing at a time, which is general knowledge when we're cueing athletes, right? Coaching cues, use 1 to 4 words, fix one thing at a time. Big ones for us that worked. When they're first learning, we would basically like do this on every rep that we could. Especially when it starts to get heavier, because it starts to get heavier, they're starting to panic a little bit. They're starting to forget the things they learned. So, like if Lauren was maxing out, you don't have to do it. She's getting a heavy weight on there that she's not really used to. I'm right here. I'm like, okay, chin up, set your feet, feel your stomach, let the weight settle, and then they would go. But you kind of help them, remind them of those things. Okay. This is big. Back and open. You'll see this. This will really help you. This is where a lot of mistakes are. Stomach out, knees out was a good one for us. And then shoulders into the bar, okay? Cue athletes through all reps. Like on your big compound movements, you gotta coach your ass off. That's where you guys gotta do your most work. And then the accessory stuff is just smaller exercises. Like we try to give them things that can't mess up for the most part, right? Not that we didn't coach, but this was our emphasis. And like I said, narrow stance box squatting. Once they got the wide stance down, then we would start putting this back in so we don't lose stimulation of those different muscle groups that we're not training all the time, okay? So, like I said, after 3 weeks, your cues are all the same. The squatting is squatting. Reach your butt back, roll your knees out, drive your shoulders in the bar. It's just not as extreme. If my feet are a little closer, I don't have to open my knees as hard. Reach back, roll your knees out, lean. This is gonna be a problem. Your athletes have very weak lower and upper backs, most of them. So getting them to lean into a squat is going to be an issue, but you just work on it, okay? Reach and lean, reach and lean, reach and lean. That will usually help them. We don't need to do that. Okay, so let's go back to the cues. All right, ready squat? Cool. So you don't have to unrack it this time. You can just, we'll start right like you're set up. Okay, widen your feet out. All right, now just do like 5 reps. Okay, keep going. All right, rest for a second. So she's doing pretty good. Now on the first rep, she reached back and she was sitting good, and the last couple inches, she kind of plopped. And then on the second one, she felt it because she's smiling. And on the second one, she fixed it, but she fixed it by letting her knees drift forward, which is what we don't want, okay? So you're real close, you're good. Now just keep reaching and rolling your knees out until you get to the box. Reach and lean, reach, 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 and open. There, that's a little better. Keep going, let's do 5. Now keep your toes in the ground. Reach and lean, 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 reach and, there you go. Now push out and drive your shoulders. Do another one. Reach and lean, toes. Do one more. All right, rest for a second. So that was better. So we kind of took care of one thing, okay? We didn't get that plop on the box. Let's take this bar out, our big heavy bar. Now go ahead and sit on the box. Yep, put your feet out like you're squatting. So she's having trouble leaning, right? It could be a low back strength issue. It could be a hip mobility issue. Or it could be she's just not used to that position. And you'll see this a lot. So what we do when we see this, so I'm looking at her right now, and your knee, so her knee's no, you're okay. Her knee's a little bit in front of her ankle. So what I gotta do is slide her hips back a little bit. So scoot your butt back on the box a little bit. There you go. So now her knee looks right. Okay, from the side her knee looks good now. But see her torso? She's got a little bit of forward lean, but if I told her to stand up right now without rocking forward, she can't do it because she has no leverage to push. But if you lean forward, then you have something to push from. So, and I'm telling you, you'll see this a lot. So what I would do with these, I'm doing exactly what I'm doing right now. Go ahead and lean forward. Right there. Now hold that position, push out on your knees and get your pressure out on your feet.
Stand up?
No, just hang out there. So you feel that position now? Okay, so now come up. Here's your 500-pound squat back. All right, now squat again and hit that position we just showed you. Open and lean, open and lean, open and lean. Now push out and drive your shoulders. So she might have a low back strength issue. It might be a mobility issue, but really the biggest thing, she just wasn't sure how she should be on the box. So just show them, okay? And that's a big one. A lot of times you'll see that, all right? All right, let's do a couple more reps. Hit a set of 2. Go ahead. Okay, now accelerate. So everything looks good on the way down. Now I'm gonna try to, yes, okay? So we fix one thing and then we'll move to the next. What do you think?
Fun.
Does it feel weird?
It feels like you can identify like a lot of weaknesses with the hip, so it's how I do.
Are your glutes burning? Is your groin?
I have a hip bone, so yeah, a little bit.
Okay. What's wrong with your hip? It just bothers you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's do a couple more and we'll kind of, so I'm going to kind of nitpick her now because we've got the basic thing down, so now we can start to fix it. Yes, she got it. Don't turn your toes out so much. Okay, now hit a couple reps. Reach and lean, reach and lean. Good. Drive your shoulders in the bar. Don't overextend your hips. Just drive your shoulders. There you go. Good. Rest for a second. You'll see that a lot. People try to like pop their hips through, and don't do that. Okay? I know you want to flex your glutes and extend your hips all the way, but when you have 300, 400, 500 pounds, I don't want to go into hyperextension and you're not getting anything out of it, okay? If you just stand up, so I'm straight up and down, at this point I've fired my glutes as much as I need to, okay? All right, let's hit 2 more. You getting sick of squatting yet? All right, cool. There you go. Reach back, pause, drive your shoulders. There you go. Now yes. So we're getting some fatigue, so her torso's going straight up and down again. Let's go. Reach and lean, reach and lean, reach and lean. Drive your shoulders. There you go. Reach and lean, reach and lean. Good. All right, rest. So it's getting better now too because she's getting warmed up a little bit. You know, that was part of, if I did that cold, I'd probably hear me grunt and groan because it would hurt. Any questions so far?
How do you account for someone that might have shorter torso and longer legs? As far as like the lean and the squat down.
So,
Athletes start to gain weight because their legs are so long.
right. So they're not going to lean as much. There's real no like set standard for how much to lean. It's lean as much as you have to get to the box without plopping. Because a lot of the times that's like her first rep, she sat pretty good and then that last couple inches she just dropped. A lot of times that's the issue. It's either they're not leaning into it the whole way down or they're not opening up the whole way down. So it's just however much they got to lean to sit without dropping.
Do you ever adjust space, like my basketball players, again, same issue, super long femur, no torso. You know, I'm just going to go 2 inches above parallel. But your thought, I mean, pro, con?
I don't like to unless you absolutely have to.
Brian Mann says it's okay.
Well, then it's definitely, then you definitely should do it. I didn't know he said that, so.
I quoted it right there.
It was rare that we had to do that, just, you know, yeah, we could get our kids pretty close to parallel most of the time, but like you might have a hip issue once in a while or something. And then, so if you do have to start them high, like Hammer said, start working them down. So they might start out a 5-mat kid, and then next week we'll go to 4 mats, okay? Or you can even do that within the same workout. A lot of people have had success with that. So set 1, 5 mats, set 2, 4 mats, and just work down until they're actually at parallel.
I noticed on some of her reps, she was kind of rocking back, back to bend that lean. What are some of the cues that you would use just to lean forward?
Yep. Yeah, just lean. Yep. Or don't rock back. Because a lot of times they don't realize they're doing it. They'll sit and rock back, and you just tell them. And a lot of times between their sets, you can take them and sit them on the box. Like if they're not getting it, what you're saying to them, just sit them down and then push them forward. Say, right there's where you want to be, okay? And then it kind of usually will click with them. Yeah.
For that, what we've had success doing down, we're working with Ryan Groman and all that. What we say is you don't put your butt cheeks on the box, you put your hamstrings on the box.
Yeah.
So they'll get that lean into it instead of, because that, like you said, you'll sit that and then they'll roll into the butt cheeks. And then you got that rock you got to do. Just say, sit in your hamstrings, and they'll get that lean forward and get that rock out of it.
Questions. First one is the second part of Cameron's question, with your depth and your lack of mobility with today's athletes, because we got to be better movers, right? So would you be an advocate of maybe fixing ankle mobility and getting them to parallel or below to a box, or wedging the heels and training what's trainable and going that route?
With a box squat, if you're doing box squat right, you shouldn't need any ankle mobility because your shin should be perpendicular.
Second question would be, what in a group setting, because of your experience with the box squat and training teams, what's your biggest bang for your buck coaching cues with 20 kids in the room doing this versus 1?
What do we see the most problems with? Probably the plopping, like the drop, and that's most of the time it's because of one. It's usually because they don't like to lean or because they're not opening enough. We have a lot of tightness through here, right, in the groin and stuff, so it's hard, or tight hip flexors too can cause that. So it's hard for them to open all the way to the box. So it's lean, 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 open, 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 open. Usually that's the biggest thing, and those are probably the 2 biggest culprits of that. Yep. Anybody else? All right. Doing okay on time. You're good if you want to sit down. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You saved me a pair of pants. Narrow stance squatting, we went over that, right? Okay. Squat bar, you talked about basketball players. Is everybody familiar with this? Okay, so the whole point of the safety bar is it sets the weight out in front of you, right? And it sits higher on your shoulders, so it messes with your leverages and puts the weight in front of you and pushes you forward more. Great training aid because you can do more work with less weight, in my opinion. Kind of like you talked about with the occlusion training, right? We can get a little more bang for our buck. This doesn't make sense, what I'm about to say, but for whatever reason worked. Our basketball players and like tall, lanky swimmers did better with this bar than a straight bar. And I'm not sure if it's because they don't have to think as much, it just kind of sits on them. But a lot of our taller kids that had trouble squatting, we would try that and it was just let it kind of sit on them and they seemed to do better with it. So that's another thing. Like for me, and I was very lucky to I basically got to pick my weight room. Like I got to go shopping for my last 3 years and have all the stuff I wanted. Working with athletes, if you can, I wouldn't use a straight bar. We would use a straight bar to teach, and then after that, they wouldn't see it again for weeks. The reason for that is I believe you can take a ton of wear and tear off of their shoulders. Being here is very tough on athletes. So, like baseball players, for instance, we would in the fall, we would teach them to squat, get the straight bar on their back, let them use that. But like our pitchers especially, once we taught the squat and stuff, they would use this bar or cambered bar, just for the reason of my hands here and my hands here is way less stress on my shoulders than this and cranked out like this. Okay? Even myself, I hardly ever use a straight bar unless I'm getting ready for a meet. I won't see a straight bar until 4 weeks out from a meet. So for your athletes, there's no point for them to use a straight bar at all, really. Unless, I mean, that's not to say you can't throw it in for variation once in a while. Or if that's all you have, I get it. You know, I understand that too. Yoke bar, so why we used it, save the shoulders, vary the stimulus. I'm a big believer in varying the stimulus. And yet, like, yes, that's part of the conjugate system, but I also train too. Like, most of us in here like to train. Tell me you don't dread squat days when you know what you got to do for 3 weeks straight, right? Like, you're squatting at 5 in the afternoon, you're like, shit. There's squats today, and I got 95% for 3 sets of... So it's kind of like, if you know what's coming, you're mentally already like, shit, you're dreading it. So with different bars, this was a huge benefit for us. Like, our kids didn't know what we were doing until they came in, but they could do it because we taught the squat with a straight bar in the first month, and they were proficient at the other movements, right? So vary the stimulus. It'll keep your kids engaged more if you can. Specialty bars will expose more weaknesses. So like I said before, you can do more work with less weight, okay? These build the upper back better than a straight bar, which is a huge area of concern with our kids now, right? There's no upper back strength. This will work on that. Okay. Like I said, this was better with our taller kids. So I talked about transitioning from the straight bar. The cues for this bar and the cambered bar and your specialty bars are really all the same. Just with the specialty bars, you're going to see a little bit of variance in things where they'll break down, okay? So for instance, like the safety bar, because my hands are here, it's harder to kind of lock my back in. And it's sitting up higher, so it creates a longer lever arm on my spine, right? So when I go to stand up, if you're going heavy, eventually you're going to see your kids cut and they're going to do this, which is okay because that's where they're weak. So you need to tap into that a little bit to make them stronger. So that's the big difference. All the other stuff on the squat is the same. So if I throw the safety bar on, I just know that eventually I'm going to see some of this. So I'm going to cue my kids, lock your upper back in more. Really crank your shoulder blades in and crank your head in the bar so you don't get rolled over. But really, that's the only big difference. Okay? They may not like it because it's a little uncomfortable or it's a little different. But other than that, it's all the same. Okay? Same with the camber bar. All right? The big difference on this one is their hands are lower. So again, the upper back thing is going to be a little goofy for them. But it's still the same. So like if I have a straight bar, pull my elbows forward, locks my upper back in. It's the same thing here. Just pull them into you. But it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to give them a little more challenge. The big thing with this is a great bar. We talked about the lean before. You have to lean with this bar. So if you have this bar and you sit with a straight up and down torso, what do I have to do? My torso straight up and down, what do I have to do to get up? I got to rock forward. With this bar, if you rock forward, these arms here, swing out in front of you, and bend your ass over. And it's, you know, we used to joke like, safety bar strikes again, because eventually the kids, they're going to get rolled over and, you know, whatever. But, so yeah, so to counteract that, you have to keep your bar path straight up and down. So what they have to do when they squat is, they have to lean forward and maintain proper position down here so they can push straight up through the weight. Whereas if I'm here and then I rock forward, those arms swing and then they get their ass kicked eventually. But that's good, right? It's okay to get to that point because that's how we bring up our weaknesses. You got to do what you're not good at to get better. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Cool. Any questions? I left time for questions at the end, so. No? Okay, well, I'll be around to answer questions or talk if you want. If you guys have any questions, equipment questions, whatever, get a hold of me, Harvey at EliteFCS.net. If you want the slides, shoot me an email, I'll send them over. I think that's it. I gave you guys a little extra breakdown. Cool. Thank you guys, appreciate it.